When I started working as a delivery person, my parents warned me that the streets could be dangerous. I'm sure they thought I might be robbed or have a tragic accident. Neither they nor anyone else could have imagined what I would experience that night. I had been delivering for 5 hours that night, and my legs were starting to complain. Just as I was about to finish my shift, one last order came in. A triple burger with extra everything. Strange, because most of the orders at that time were tacos or fried chicken. The address was a house in a neighborhood half forgotten by the city. There wasn't much traffic. The streets were poorly lit, and several houses looked abandoned. When I arrived, the place was no less strange. A 2-story house with the windows boarded up from the inside. The door had marks from something I couldn't identify, as if someone had been scratching or banging on it. But I'm not one to ask a lot of questions. Deliver the food and get out of there. That's my job. I knocked on the door, and after a few seconds, it was opened by a tall, thin man in a stained gray t-shirt and pants that looked 2 sizes too big. His hair was a mess, and there was something odd about his eyes, as if he was concentrating on something I couldn't see. "You got here fast," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He held out a crumpled bill and took the bag. As I was about to turn around to leave, I heard him say, "Wait a minute. How did you get here? Wait a minute, what's your name?" Jason? "Thank you, Jason." The man answered me in a voice that sounded lower this time. Something about the way he pronounced my name made me nervous. I couldn't help but think he was a total weirdo, but not much more than that. It was 10 minutes before my phone rang again. It was my boss. He told me to go back to the house, that the customer told him he needed you urgently, and that something was very wrong with his order. But he still refused to say what. For fear of a lawsuit, my boss agreed to let me go back and talk it over with him. When I arrived, everything was the same as before. The house was still as dull as before, but now there was a strange smell in the air. Something foul and metallic. I knocked on the door and, receiving no answer, pushed it open. It was ajar. I went in slowly, calling his name, though he never said it. All was silent except for a rustling sound coming from the kitchen. I walked over and saw him. The man was sitting on the floor with the empty lunch bag beside him. In his hand, he was holding the cardboard box the hamburger came in, and he was chewing on it as if it were bread. Pieces of cardboard and grease were falling out of his mouth. "What are you doing?" "It was delicious, but it wasn't enough. I wanted more, and I can't wait to order again. I'm sorry, but I need to feed. You understand, don't you?" I took a step back trying to understand what I was saying, but it was too late. He jumped up and pushed me against the wall. His strength didn't match his skinny body. My head hit the wall, and for a moment I lost consciousness. When I came to, I was on the floor, my hands bound by a cable he had found in some corner. The man was still in the kitchen, chewing on something I didn't want to identify. I tried to free my hands. The cable was tight, but something on the edge was badly cut, leaving a piece of metal exposed. I twisted around enough until I managed to use it to wear the rope free. It took me several minutes, but I finally got free. I slowly got to my feet. The man was distracted, rummaging through the remains of the food. I grabbed a knife lying in the sink and took a step forward. The floor creaked under my feet, and his head swiveled toward me. "Hey, what do you think you're doing? Do you know what it would cost me to tie you up? What have you done to me, you psycho?" "Don't be mad at me. You eat animals, don't you?" "Oh, I do too, and I eat humans too." "What's the difference? You're completely crazy. I need to eat. You were the dessert." Furious, I ran towards him, but with one blow, he threw me away before I could attack him. I fell to the ground, and the knife slipped out of my reach. Before I could get up, he was already on top of me, trying to bite me. With all of my strength, I managed to push him to the side. His head hit the corner of the table, and for a moment, he lay motionless. I took the opportunity to get up and run to the door, but it was locked. The keys, they had to be somewhere. I went through the man's pockets while he was still dizzy. I found a key ring, but before I could try it, I felt a tug on my leg. He was still trying to attack me. "You're not leaving. I already made up my mind to eat you. I don't want anything else." Then he hit me with a force that threw me to the ground. He grabbed a chair and lifted over his head, but before he could hit me, I rolled to the side and managed to dodge him. With an unexpected leap, he lunged at me. The whole thing became a desperate scramble. I managed to grab a piece of broken wood and used it to hit him on the head several times. Finally, he fell to the ground, motionless. When I was sure that this time he had been knocked unconscious, I watched as the man gasped for breath as he reached for the keys. My hands were shaking, but finally managed to open the door. I ran to my bike and started up without looking back. I didn't care if someone found the body or not. I just wanted to get away from that place. As soon as I got far enough away, I reported the incident to the delivery service, and everyone seemed surprised. But when I tried to go to the justice system and television to apply more pressure, I got nowhere. Apparently, the man's father had a lot of money and contracts, making him get away with everything he did. The case never made the news, and the house appeared abandoned. Sometimes at night, I remember what I went through that day. To think that my life would have ended just to make food for a psychopath terrifies me. Now I work in an office, but I still work in customer service. I just hope I never come across something like that again. Hey guys, we noticed that only a small portion of you are subscribed to the channel. If you really enjoy our stories, please follow us and like the video. It's free and it really helps us a lot to keep growing. We upload videos daily and interact a lot with our community, as we upload stories that you recommend us, and once a month, we upload your own stories. And to those of you who are already subscribed, we appreciate all your likes, comments, and your constant support. You are as much a part of SSG Animations as we are. And now, back to the video.
My name is Alan Walker, and I'm 29 years old. I work from home as a video editor. A lot of people complain about this job because they can't see their friends or leave their house. Me, I'm happy. I love my job. I live alone in a small apartment in a quiet part of town. That night was just like any other night. I'd finished an assignment for an annoying client, and my only concern was what to eat. The fridge was almost empty, so I resorted to the usual, a delivery app. While pursuing the menu at a local restaurant, I decided on a double burger with fries and a large soda. I ordered, paid, and waited. I lay on the couch with my phone in my hand, watching videos. After about 40 minutes, I heard the doorbell ring. I reluctantly got up, checked through the peephole, and saw the delivery guy. A young guy in a black jacket with a cap that covered half his face. I opened the door, we exchanged a few words, and he handed me a cardboard box. I paid no attention. I just wanted to eat and get back to my series. When I returned to the living room and placed the box on the table, something caught my eye. It was bigger and heavier than I expected. I frowned, thinking maybe they'd put the potatoes in another heavy container, or maybe it was some kind of new packaging. But when I opened the lid, my stomach cringed. There was no food inside. What I did see made me freeze for a few seconds. Inside the box was a wad of bills wrapped in rubber bands, a small black gun, and a package sealed with tape that looked like vacuum-sealed plastic. I didn't know what was inside, but I didn't need to be a genius to figure out it wasn't something legal. My first instinct was to think this was some kind of prank or hidden camera. I looked around, but the apartment was empty as usual. Then I checked the label on the box. It was for a Chris Vaughn. That wasn't my address or my name. I quickly got up and went to the window to look for the delivery guy, but he was gone. The streets below were almost deserted, with only a couple of parked cars. My mind was spinning as I looked back at the box. What was going on? What was I supposed to do? What should I do? Part of me wanted to close the box and leave it outside the apartment, forget everything. Another, more logical part told me I should call the police. I picked up the phone and dialed, but when I reached the second digit, I stopped. What if this got me in trouble? I imagined the questions, the officers coming into my house, confiscating everything and maybe getting me involved. This wasn't mine, but I had no way to prove it either. I decided to look up the number of the restaurant to try to return the box. Maybe the delivery guy would come back. but before I could find it, the doorbell rang again, this time insistently. My heart skipped a beat. I approached the door slowly and peered through the peephole. There were 2 men standing in front of it. They were not your typical delivery men. They were both dressed in black, and one of them was wearing dark glasses despite the hour. The other had a phone in his hand and seemed nervous, fidgeting back and forth. I didn't like what I saw. One of them spoke, though I didn't recognize the voice.
"Open up. We know you're there."
My mind was working at full speed. I couldn't just open the door. I stood back silently, waiting for them to leave, but the loud knock on the door made me take a step back.
"This is no joke, buddy. We know you have the delivery. Hand it over now, and we'll leave."
I backed toward the table, my eyes glued to the box. I picked up the phone again, but my hand was shaking. I didn't know whether to call the police or stay silent. Just then I heard the sound of the doorknob. They were trying to open the door from the outside. Adrenaline took over. I grabbed the box and ran into the room. This box was my only life insurance. I know that anyone else would have just handed it over, but if they killed me just for having it, if by returning that box they used that weapon against me or against another innocent person. I locked the door and stood there, listening. The noise on the other side of the front door increased. They were coming in. My thoughts were in disarray. This couldn't be happening to me. The sound of the door giving way was like a gunshot. I knew I didn't have much time. I grabbed my phone and randomly dialed 911, but the call didn't connect. I didn't know if it was because of something they had done or a technical problem. I was stuck. My footsteps could be heard in the living room. I could hear them moving things around, searching. My room had no way out, except for the window, which looked out onto an alley. I opened the curtains and saw that it was about a 3-story drop. It was not an option. Suddenly, one of the men knocked on my bedroom door.
"Listen, we know it was a mistake. Give us what's ours, and this ends here."
I didn't answer. My eyes were fixed on the box, especially the gun. I'd never touched one in my life, but now it seemed to be my only option. Trembling, I pulled it out of the package and tried to remember everything I'd seen in movies or a TV show. I removed the safety. The only reason I knew the gun had a safety was because I saw it on TV. The door began to give way. The first man entered, and without thinking, I pulled the trigger. A deafening noise filled the room, and the guy fell backward. My head was spinning, but there was no time to process it. The other guy yelled something and lunged toward me. The second guy was much faster than I expected. Before I could aim, he hit me hard in the wrist, causing the gun to fall to the ground. We stumbled and fell together, crashing into my bed. I tried to hit him, but he blocked me easily and pinned me to the floor. His hands tightened around my neck. With all my strength, I grabbed a lamp from the nightstand and smashed it against his head. He grunted, releasing me just enough so I could roll to the side. I looked desperately for the gun, but I couldn't find it. He staggered to his feet, blood dripping from his forehead, and pulled a knife from his belt. My eyes met the box on the floor. Without thinking, I grabbed it and threw it at him. The weight threw him off balance enough for him to fall to the bed. I seized that moment, grabbed the gun again, and pointed it at him. "Stop, or I'll shoot!" The man ignored my warning and took a step toward me with the knife in his hand. His face was unhinged, a mixture of fury and determination. My hand trembled as I held the weapon, pointing it directly at his chest. He didn't stop. Without thinking, I pulled the trigger, but my finger missed the tension and the shot hit the floor. The sound of the shot echoed throughout the room, and a small piece of wood jumped off the floor where the bullet hit. The noise didn't stop him. Suddenly, the man who had fallen first staggered to his feet and charged me from behind. The combined weight of both of them knocked me to the ground like a rag doll. Punches rained down on me, trying to snatch my weapon. "Drop it!" In the midst of the struggle, I managed to turn around enough to bite one of them in the hand. He screamed and let me go for a second, which gave me a chance to free myself. But I no longer had the gun. All I had left was my survival instinct. I ran for the door, slipping on the floor mat in my haste. I barely reached the stairs when I felt a tug on my shirt, but I managed to wriggle free. I sprinted down the stairs, stumbling and falling down the last flight. The blow was brutal. My side slammed into the steps, and for a second, I thought I couldn't move. They were behind me. I could hear their accelerated footsteps and the curses they were hurling as they descended. I didn't stop. The pain in my body made it hard to breathe. But I stood up with a mixture of adrenaline and pure terror. I ran out into the street without even looking back. There was a police station nearby, so I ran as fast as I could. When I arrived, I told them everything that had happened, and they immediately understood that they were not normal criminals. They went with several patrol cars to my house, but it was too late. They had fled, but not before destroying my house as revenge for what had happened. It had been a long day at the office. My head felt like a blender with all the problems that had accumulated during the week, and my only solution was to resort to my favorite escape: pizza and a cold beer. The clock read 10 o'clock at night when I called the usual restaurant. The girl who took my order sounded distracted, as if work had her as exhausted as it had me. "It'll be 30 minutes, she said in a disinterested tone before hanging up. I settled back on the couch and turned on the television. I remember that night the neighborhood was just quiet, too quiet, almost dead. Not even the neighbor's dog was barking like it always did. Maybe it was because most of my neighbors were on vacation. It was that time of year. In any case, that was a good thing. The emptier the neighborhood, the better. There was a knock on the door exactly 25 minutes after I ordered. I got up without thinking too much about it and opened the door. In front of me was a thin, somewhat unkempt-looking man. He was wearing the restaurant's red cap and a wrinkled uniform that looked a size larger than it should. His smile was strange, more like a grimace than a genuine expression. "Here's your pizza." The man spoke to me with an exaggeratedly cheerful tone that didn't match his somewhat lost look. I paid him quickly and tipped him before he could say anything else. I closed the door feeling slightly relieved, thinking the interaction was over. But that was just the beginning. That night, as I was devouring the pizza, I heard a noise outside. I thought it was the neighbors, but when I looked out of the window, I didn't see anyone. I didn't think much of it. I went back to the couch and tried to relax. But the noise was repeated, this time closer. It was as if someone was scratching at the outside wall. I got up to check again, but again there was nothing. After a while, I was convinced that I was just imagining things. I turned off the TV and went to sleep. During the wee hours of the morning, I awoke with a start. There was a soft tapping on my bedroom window. My heart raced, and my mind began to think of all the possibilities. Still, I plucked up the courage and went over. I opened the curtain quickly, but saw only my reflection. The next morning, I found something that made my hair stand on end. There were greasy finger marks on my bedroom window. They weren't mine, that's for sure. I tried to convince myself that it had been a child or something, but something didn't add up. The marks were too big and looked fresh. My mind returned to the delivery man from the night before, but I dismissed the idea almost immediately. It just didn't make sense. That night, I decided to order pizza again, perhaps as an unconscious way of coping with paranoia. To my surprise, the same guy delivered the order. This time, he talked more. "Your house is interesting. It has a lot of personality. You know that so much decoration is in vain, don't you?" The man spoke to me as he handed over the box. His tone was strange, as if he was talking about more than just bricks and paint. I closed the door before he could say anything else. I didn't tip him this time. Things began to escalate quickly after that. One night on my way home from work, I found a note slipped under the door. It was a carelessly folded piece of paper, and when I opened it, I saw a message written in shaky handwriting. "On the inside, your house is just an empty box. Just like you." A shiver ran down my spine. I tried to ignore it, and I put the paper away in a drawer, just in case. The next day, I found something else. There was a package on the doorstep. Inside, there was a completely burnt pizza, and on it, a broken mirror. There was no message, but the intent was clear. This was no longer a coincidence. That night, I reinforced the locks and kept the lights on. I couldn't help but think of the delivery man. His vacant stare, his crooked smile. Everything about him had been unsettling from the beginning. But why me? I hadn't done anything to provoke him. I tried to rationalize it, but I couldn't find an answer that would reassure me. Around midnight, someone knocked on the door. Not a normal knock, but an irregular, almost anxious knocking. I froze for a moment before deciding I wasn't going to open it. "I know you're there." It was him. I could recognize that forced tone anywhere. I didn't respond. Finally, the pounding stopped, but it wasn't a relief. I knew this was just the beginning. The next few days were hell. Every time I left the house, I felt like someone was watching me. At work, I started getting strange phone calls. No one was talking, but I could hear slow breathing on the other end of the line. I tried blocking the numbers, but they always came back from somewhere else. Paranoia began to consume me. Even calling him at the pizzeria was not an option, as I was told he had recently resigned. One night, while checking the security cameras I had recently installed, I saw him. He was standing in front of my house, staring into one of the windows. He wasn't moving, just standing there like a statue. It was him. There was no doubt. His uniform was still the same, but now it was stained and worn. His face had an air of madness about it that I didn't notice before. I felt trapped in my own home. I called the police, but when they arrived, he was gone. They found an empty pizza box on my doorstep. Inside was a photograph of me, taken from somewhere nearby. The message on the back was brief. "You're dead. You always were. Just like me." I couldn't take it anymore. That night I decided to confront him. I had a baseball bat in my hands and my phone was ready to call 911. If he was going to show up again, I wasn't going to stand idly by. Hours passed. Finally, I heard footsteps outside the house. When the beating started, I approached the door fast, but when I opened it, there was no one there. As I stepped outside, I saw him. He was in the garden holding a pizza box. This time, he wasn't smiling. His gaze was filled with something indescribable, something that chilled my blood. "This is not for you." After telling me that, he opened the box and I was shocked by its contents. Inside was a bloody knife. I didn't wait for him to move. I ran at him with the bat, but he dodged my first blow with an agility that I didn't expect. What followed was a violent struggle. The knife slipped from his hands and fell to the ground. I managed to push him back, but he didn't back down. Instead, he started laughing, a hollow, terrifying laugh. "Do you understand? None of this matters. I'm dead. You're dead. What does it matter if you hit me? It doesn't matter if you kill me. Can you kill something that's not alive?" Furious, I hit him violently, But he no longer defended himself. He only laughed. While he was on the ground, I called the police, keeping the bat pointed at him. But he was still laughing. Even when the officers arrived and arrested him, his last sentence before they took him away was a whisper. "The truth will set you free." A week has passed since then. The police found a lot of disturbing things in his apartment. Pictures of me, rambling notes about how I wasn't real, and piles of empty pizza boxes. They said he suffered from something called Cotard syndrome, a strange mental condition that made him believe he was dead and that everything around him was dead. He didn't really have a reason to be obsessed with me. He only did it because he thought it was of no consequence to do so. Even though he's now in custody, I can't help but feel it's not over. The nights are still long, and the noises in the house haven't stopped. Sometimes when I look out the window, I think I see a figure in the distance. Maybe it's just my nerves. Or maybe his madness was contagious. I just know I'm still afraid. And I don't think that will change.